So, is anybody raising their hand? Maybe, or maybe Ken and Ram have been reading the comments to know that there's something I should be aware of. I wasn't looking at that.
There are
Well,
a lot of
Robbie has his hand
comments.
up. No surprise. Robbie's going to handle interoperability. I hope you can get some good speakers on some modern aspects of hybrid interoperability.
Yeah, with the good grace of my colleague Todd Schneider, we have one or two people lined up. I will be also speaking, and Michael Bennett is not here at this meeting, but he'll be speaking to us on one session. I will try to share my views on interoperability. And right now, I have a question. The question is, while I am thanking in the chat as well, uh, John Sova and Pat Hayes for giving us a pre and post to ontology discussions. Uh, Pre is context is necessary, post is explanations. And you covered them both very well, Gary. So without much debate on that, the question I have is that this track is ontology and AI. So how do I view as a layman, let's say, the ontologies in AI? Are they embedded? Are they discoverable? Are they distributed? Are they in multiple concatenated forms? What is our view of ontologies and AI together? That's my question. Anyone, including Gary.
Well, I guess I could say a few words. So hopefully we're speaking not only to the layman, but to people who are in the field, and we have many here who might be able to have a rich content. So my earlier talk at the launch talked about the semantic spectrum because we had semantic web, and I still believe that we have a variety of semantic resources that are important. But when you bring it down to the layman, I guess we are moving away from formal logic for that person to a more conversational type of understanding of things, and it's actually not visible to the regular user. So the big difference between a person in the field as a developer, a knowledge engineer, and a layman, I think, on this topic. And there's just a lot more that can be said. I see John Soa has his hand up now. John has a lot of things I'm sure to say, including maybe some information about his track that we
Go
should be
ahead, John.
aware of.
Yes, well, one thing that I really liked was Ram's view of several thousand years of the work in India and many different versions of ontologies and knowledge representations. And I think that is essential. And one of the things that I am very strongly opposed to is the idea that we can have a single perfect ontology. No such thing is possible. But we must have precise ontologies with formal logic for anything that is dealing with science and engineering. We can't do engineering without absolute precision. And for that, you must have the ability to take mapping from your ordinary natural language into the precision. And when we talk about ordinary people who have never studied logic really do know the subject that they're working on. You can go to pick anybody from any topic, from bridge building to running a locomotive to building a house, that when they talk about their own subject, they are very, very precise. They may not be using formal logic, but everything they're talking about their topic can be translated to and from logic with an ontology specialized for their subject matter. So this is something that we really have to consider, that formal representation is absolutely essential when you talk about science and engineering. You can't get away with some loosey-goosey kind of approximation.
Okay, I noticed that Janet had her hand up briefly. Oh, there it is again.
Can I read
Janet, you're
about
next.
it? Yes. I'm wondering,
this idea of world models coming to the fore, how are people discussing whether that is the same as ontologies, or it seems like it's Back to the Future that it's similar but different, or are they saying we realize now the importance of ontologies, just world models?
I don't myself think they're the same. The ontologies contribute to world models. World models have to be dynamic, so they had a lot of instances data. What's happening with this car at this moment, or I'm on my way to deliver this package, and what do I do with it, and so forth. So ontologies provide some structure here, but the world model has a lot of instance dynamic data to it, I believe. So
okay, that's interesting. So in the slide from Pat Hayes and John McCarthy that I presented last week, they were talking about what AI needed in terms of a world model, and now you're adding that they're using it more as a world model that has dynamic instance data. So it's both an understanding of the world, of the structure of the world and the categories of the world, and how to...
But potentially, depending on the function, it has to also know something about people. So,
right.
In context, it was the idea of knowing something about intentions of other agents that are going on.
That's right.
Agents rather than people.
Right.
Now, I will note that we have both Deborah McGinnis and others here who might have more to say about this from direct experience. Mike Grininger spoke last week. He may have more to say about that. So I'd be interested in hearing what they might add. John, you have your hand up still. Is that another go at it? No. Okay. So I didn't know if Deborah.
Well, Gary, I guess just maybe a quick comment on your question. I think maybe Janet is right. I mean, I think we might have to just be clear on some of the terminology, because this might go back to the way back in prehistory about the distinction between ontologies and knowledge bases, right? Which eventually became the T-box, A-box combination kind of idea. And I think maybe some people, when they hear the phrase world model in the context of neurosymbolic, I think some think of it as being the ontologies, / T-box, and others, I think maybe based on your comments, think of, no, it's the ontology and the knowledge base, it's the T-box and the A-box that constitute the world model. But I think definitely when people are talking about world model in the context of foundational models, I think to me, that's one of the intersections between the neuro and the symbolic communities.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's more common to think about it with the T-box and the A-box, and these days also an A-box might have some uncertainty in it, not just black and white 0-1 probabilities associated with it. And in that context, I think the ontology plus the A-box aligns with what I heard John say of the precision, but the things that world models are doing are not as precise. So I think that bringing in the uncertainty angle is more important these days. And certainly we're seeing more and more knowledge graphs be probability aware or uncertainty aware, as well as provenance aware. And I think that's part of our future. And if we don't put it as part of our future, other people are going to eat our lunch.
Uncertainty is inherent in nature. John?
Or certainly in measurement.
Okay, I just have one quick question, and I think Ram's survey of Indian logic and philosophy was immense. And to try to give any kind of approximation, summary of that in a short time is impossible. But I would like to see more about his slides and all that. Does Ram have some references or some larger source of knowledge that we could look at that goes into that in more detail.
Has that been published somewhere? This is Cora, so excuse me for cutting in. No, I'm a classicist, and I'm interested in this background of comparisons with other philosophies, with Aristotle, with going back to these other ways of thinking. So I wondered if Ram has published this somewhere.
Okay. To answer that for both of you is that I really, going back into history, I first made this presentation in 1992, okay, at IIT Kanpur. So after that, I never thought about it and just put it on the back burner until I decided to talk about it now. So I've not really written anything about it, but there's a lot of stuff which you can find. Let me see. And one of the things, actually, the chatbots are pretty good at giving this thing now. And also, there is a comment here by Sab, who's also been thinking about it. And in fact, is writing a paper on Jaina logic and design. So if people are interested, I could potentially send you preview copies of it, Sab. But there's a lot of literature on this. And I get all my information from the books I study about Indian philosophy. Okay, so that's where my knowledge comes from.
Well, could you please?
I can give you some references, John Sova, on the books that I read.
Well, write them up in a nice.
Very helpful.
Right, write them up in a nice little note and send the note to Ontolog Forum, and I'll give a copy to Cora.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. I just might add one small
Ravi,
small
please,
note.
yeah.
One small note.
We have
that
some questions in the
other
chat
people.
that we need to handle.
Okay.
Jake, you have a number of comments in the chat. Jake? You still here?
Jackie has this very interesting comment on the slides which Gemini generated. So Gemini generated. And there's a reason for that, Jackie. So offline I can talk.
We are in the process intelligence. This is Mahesh Saladi. And we are trying to introduce to add ontology to our process intelligence. But our process intelligence is real time and ontology is always falling behind. How do we really catch up and make it liquid, like make it equal to what is happening today in the business processes, which are changing almost every day?
Thanks. Okay, Jake?
Yeah, sorry, it just occurred to me while Gary was talking, and he mentioned some of the large model generation of spatial worlds. I was wondering if there was if you thought there was a current link back to LambdaMu. If you remember, Pavel Curtis's one started at Xerox in 1990, which was an object-oriented programmable world. Throughout the 90s, there was quite a lot of research on that. I've talked to a few people about it before, but I'm just wondering if you see a connection back to Lambda, if you're familiar with it.
I wasn't thinking of that in particular, and I'm less familiar with it. It's been perhaps too long, but I think there is actually within the 80s and 90s, going back at least that far, maybe even farther. Was lots of thought about world models or discussion about it, but again, we say we didn't have the computing power and the storage and so forth that we later had to handle things like knowledge graphs. So there's just a lot more reasonable ability to handle some of the complexity that is involved in a world model.
Thank you for that.
And also, Mahesh talked about this processes dynamically changing. I think that's an important topic, and there's some research going on. There's research going on in that area, definitely. I think Michael, you used to talk about process specification language, if you remember. When you are at NIST. So there's this whole notion of dynamic processes. The processes are constantly changing in the business world. That is, you develop a process ontology at a time interval X, and at a time interval X2, it'll be a different process ontology. So how do you handle those things, I guess, is the question, which Mahesh has pointed. Yeah, I think again that's kind of a distinction that it kind of rises between the ontology and how it gets used. So one of my PhD students um, is looking at Riley Moore is looking at the distinction between the process ontology, which captures a lot of the fundamental notions of what is an activity and the recurrences, et cetera, from the data theory, which is maybe a generalization of the A box. And that's where you would have, say, specific business processes that can change. Their description changes. The underlying semantics of an activity occurrence can never end before it begins. Like a subactivity is always occurs during the activity, not the other way around. Those are fundamental common sense notions of activities and their occurrences that hold across all particular processes. It's the data theories that change. It's kind of a generalization again of the A box.
Great. Okay, the next person who was in the chat is Phil. Phil? Phil Jackson?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I think I asked a question, which is whether these differences in ontologies that have been discussed would imply that we should have a meta-ontology or an ontology of ontologies. And Janet Singer gave an answer that she indicates she thinks so.
EJ Lakshmi ready, or one other.
So anyway, that was the topic that I was asking about, and that's a pretty large topic, and maybe there's too much for us to talk about now. But anyway, it's a concept.
Right, and I think the slide on category theory and how useful it can be in spanning deep differences in assumptions. Well, that's what category theory was developed for. That actually is promising. I think because I think one sort of has a challenge here with the set theoretic worldview that takes knowledge representation as being stable and straightforward, and that was more the left-hand side of Rom's diagram. And then the heterodox views were more category theoretic, and maybe with DOL and progress in challenging the idea that representation is one kind of thing, having a meta representational view or something like that. Maybe Ken's work will come back into this anyway. I think it's promising. It's a big challenge, but it does have to get at some of the deeper issues of what it means to represent for a machine.
So I would just quickly add that I tend to think of foundational ontologies as this meta-ontology, and last year we had Giancarlo speak a little bit about some of the things that might go into that. So you might go back to take a look at his presentation and publications on foundational ontologies.
Okay, the last, I'd like to ask Todd if he wishes to speak. You did post something in the chat. Todd, you still here? Yeah.
Yes, I'm here, Kenneth, but no, I don't have any questions to ask. Thank you.
Okay. And then Ravi, you had your hand up for a while.
Well, thank you, Ken. I had only two comments. The meta object facility of OMG has BPMN for business process modeling, but there is no T dependence as far as I know as of the time we developed BPMN. It was also related to the resource description framework, and the joining two was called ODM, Ontology Development Meta Model. So there is a merit in what Phil Jackson raised as a question. And just as in the earth science data, familiar to most of us, there is a metadata about the repository. Similarly, there might be a merit, and certainly in old Indian philosophy, there is a meta ontology. But in normal IT usage, we have a case for meta ontology. Whether it's the same as foundational or upper is something I cannot comment right now. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I think we've covered everything in the chat. And unless there are further comments or questions, I think it's time that we adjourn and look forward to next week. And Gary has already given.
Yeah, next week is Randy Goebel will be talking about foundational models and the interoperability between them and the role of explanation in building such a hybrid.
Great. Thanks to everyone, especially to Ram and Gary, and looking forward to seeing all of you next week. And with that,
great session. Thank you.
It's a great session.
Right. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for all the symbolism.